Marcus made the hardest decision of his military career. Instead of continuing toward the extraction point, he led his team into a 3-story stone building that offered defensive positions and multiple escape routes. They would make their stand here. Command, Alpha Team is going static in Building 12. We're going to hold this position until air support arrives. Copy that, Rodriguez. Hold what you've got. Help is coming. The building they'd chosen was an old merchant's shop with thick stone walls and narrow windows that provided good defensive positions. Marcus positioned his team strategically. Walsh took the ground floor, covering the main entrance and the street. Chen climbed to the second floor to watch the approaches from the east and south. Kim went to the top floor with her sniper rifle, where she had the best view of the ridge and surrounding buildings. Marcus stayed mobile, moving between floors to coordinate their defense and provide support wherever it was needed most. As they settled into their positions, the enemy forces began their final approach. The first attack came from the street level. Enemy fighters approached the building in tactical formation, using doorways and abandoned vehicles for cover. Walsh let them get close before opening fire with controlled bursts from her automatic rifle. Her first shots dropped 2 attackers immediately. The others dove for cover behind a broken-down truck, returning fire through its shattered windows. Bullets sparked off the stone walls of the building, sending chips of rock flying through the air. Contact front, Walsh reported calmly. At least 8 hostiles in the street. On the second floor, Chen had spotted enemy fighters moving between buildings to surround them. Movement east and south. They're trying to flank us. Kim's voice came through the radio from the top floor. I can see the snipers on the ridge clearly now. Count shows 12 shooters in prepared positions. The enemy snipers opened fire almost immediately. High-powered rounds slammed into the building's upper walls, some penetrating through the ancient stone to embed themselves in the interior walls. Kim had to keep moving to avoid the accurate fire from the ridge. Marcus climbed to the second floor to help Chen deal with the flanking attempt. Through the window, he could see at least 15 enemy fighters moving through the narrow streets in a coordinated assault. They were using proper military tactics, advancing by bounds with covering fire. Chen, take the ones on the left. I'll handle the right side. Both Rangers opened fire simultaneously. Marcus's rifle found its mark on 3 targets before the others scrambled for better cover. Chen's accurate shooting forced the left flank to halt their advance and seek protection behind a stone wall. But, even as they fought off this attack, more enemy forces were positioning themselves around the building. Marcus could hear footsteps on the roof above them, indicating that some attackers had managed to climb up from adjacent buildings. Kim, you've got company on the roof, he warned. I hear them, she replied. Sounds like at least 3 sets of boots. The enemy fighters on the roof began trying to break through, using crowbars and other tools to pry up the stone tiles. Pieces of debris started falling into the top floor room where Kim was positioned. She quickly moved to a different window and angled her rifle upward. When the first enemy fighters had appeared through the hole they'd created, Kim's shot eliminated the threat immediately. The other attackers on the roof retreated temporarily, but Marcus knew they'd be back. Walsh's voice crackled through the radio from the ground floor. They're bringing up heavy weapons. I can see a machine gun team setting up across the street. Marcus rushed down to the ground floor and looked through Walsh's window. Sure enough, enemy fighters were positioning a bell-fed machine gun behind sandbags they'd quickly constructed from grain sacks found in one of the abandoned shops. That thing will tear this building apart, Walsh observed. She was right. The thick stone walls could stop rifle bullets, but sustained fire from a heavy machine gun would eventually compromise their defensive positions. They had to eliminate that weapon before it could be brought into action. I'll take it out, Marcus said, checking his grenade supply. Negative, Sergeant. Too much open ground. You'll never make it. Before Marcus could argue, Kim's voice came through their radios. I have a shot on the machine gun crew. From her position on the top floor, Kim had a clear angle to the enemy weapon position. Her sniper rifle cracked once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. The machine gun crew went down, and the heavy weapon toppled over uselessly. But the victory was short-lived. More enemy fighters immediately moved to replace the fallen crew, and they began setting up the machine gun in a different location with better protection from Kim's overwatch position. Chen's voice from the second floor carried a new note of urgency. "Sergeant, we've got vehicles approaching from the north. Armed pickup trucks with mounted weapons." Marcus climbed back to the second floor and looked through the window. 3 pickup trucks were racing toward their position, each one carrying enemy fighters and what appeared to be mounted heavy weapons. The vehicles were moving fast, kicking up clouds of dust as they navigated the narrow streets. "Command, Alpha Team. Enemy is bringing up vehicle-mounted weapons. Request immediate air support." "Copy, Alpha Team. Fast movers are 2 minutes out. Hang in there." 2 minutes. Marcus looked at his ammunition supply and realized they were running low. Each team member had started the mission with a basic combat load, but they'd been engaged in almost continuous fighting for over an hour. Professional soldiers or not, they couldn't hold off this kind of assault much longer. The pickup trucks reached the marketplace and began circling their building like wolves around wounded prey. The mounted weapons opened fire, sending streams of bullets through the windows and doorways. The Rangers had to keep their heads down as heavy-caliber rounds shredded everything in their path. Walsh scrambled away from her window as bullets shattered the stone frame inches from her head. "Ground floor is compromised. These walls won't stop that kind of fire." Marcus made another tactical decision. "Everyone to the second floor. We consolidate our defense there." As Walsh climbed the stairs, the enemy assault intensified from all directions. Rifle fire poured in from the surrounding buildings while the vehicle-mounted weapons continued their devastating barrage. The enemy snipers on the ridge added their own accurate fire to the chaos. Kim had to abandon her top-floor position when sniper rounds began punching through the walls around her. She joined the rest of the team on the second floor, where they took cover behind the thickest interior walls. "Ammunition check," Marcus ordered. The reports weren't good. Walsh had 2 magazines left. Chen had 3. Kim had 4 magazines for her rifle plus her sidearm. Marcus himself was down to his last 2 magazines. They had maybe 10 minutes of sustained fighting left before they'd be reduced to fighting with knives and bare hands. The radio crackled with the voice they'd all been hoping to hear. "Alpha Team, this is Falcon 1-1. Fast movers are on station. Transmit target coordinates." Marcus grabbed his laser designator and moved to a window that gave him a clear view of the enemy positions. "Falcon 1-1, Alpha Team. Marking targets now." He painted the pickup trucks first, then the machine gun positions, then the sniper nests on the ridge. Each target appeared on the pilot's display as Marcus held the laser steady despite the incoming fire. "Alpha Team, Falcon 1-1 has good target acquisition. Danger close. Keep your heads down." The F-16 fighter jets screamed overhead so low that the building shook from their passage. Moments later, precision-guided missiles began impacting the enemy positions with devastating accuracy. The first explosion eliminated 2 of the pickup trucks instantly, sending burning metal flying through the air. The second strike hit the machine gun position, creating a crater where the enemy weapon had been. The third missile impacted the ridge, silencing several sniper positions in a massive cloud of smoke and debris. But the enemy forces were larger and more dispersed than Marcus had realized. Even as the airstrikes continued, more fighters appeared from buildings and hiding places throughout the village. Some carried shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles, which they immediately began launching at the circling jets. "Falcon 1-1 is taking missile fire," the pilot reported. "We're going to have to pull back and reassess." Marcus watched in dismay as the fighter jets climbed to higher altitude to avoid the ground-to-air threats. The immediate danger had passed, but they were still surrounded by enemy forces, and now those forces were angry. The radio brought more bad news. "Alpha Team, this is Command. Satellite imagery shows enemy reinforcements arriving from multiple directions. Vehicle convoys approaching from the east and west. You're about to be facing over 100 hostiles." 100. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment and tried to process that number. His 4-person team had been fighting for their lives against overwhelming odds for over an hour, and the situation was still getting worse. Chen suddenly pointed toward the marketplace. "Sergeant, look at that smoke." Fresh smoke was rising from the center of the village, but this wasn't from the airstrikes or burning vehicles. The smoke was too controlled, too purposeful. As Marcus watched, a figure emerged from the gray haze like something out of a nightmare. The man was tall and moved with the fluid grace of a professional soldier. He carried a sniper rifle with advanced optics, and his tactical gear was far superior to anything they'd seen from the other enemy fighters. Even more concerning was the way the other enemy forces seemed to defer to his presence. "Command, we have a possible high-value individual in the marketplace. Professional appearance, high-end equipment, appears to be directing enemy operations. Copy, Alpha Team. Can you confirm identity?" Marcus studied the figure through his rifle scope. The man's face was partially concealed by tactical gear, but something about his movements and equipment suggested extensive military training. This wasn't a local insurgent or even a foreign fighter. This was someone with serious credentials. As Marcus watched, the mysterious sniper began methodically engaging targets with his rifle. But he wasn't shooting at the Ranger positions. Instead, he was eliminating his own fighters who had been wounded or were retreating from the battle. "He's killing his own people," Walsh observed in horror. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. Whoever this person was, he was willing to eliminate his own forces to prevent them from being captured and interrogated. That kind of operational security suggested they were dealing with someone from an elite military or intelligence unit. The enemy sniper finished his grim task and, then, turned his attention toward their building. Even from several hundred meters away, Marcus could feel the weight of the man's gaze as he studied their defensive positions. Kim raised her rifle and tried to acquire a shot, but the enemy sniper had already moved behind cover. "He's good," she admitted. "Professional-level training." As if to prove her point, the enemy sniper's rifle cracked once from his concealed position. The bullet struck the window frame just inches from Kim's head with surgical precision. It was both a demonstration of skill and a clear message. Marcus made one final radio call. "Command, Alpha Team. We are heavily outnumbered and facing a professional adversary. Request immediate extraction and reinforcement." "Copy, Alpha Team. Extraction birds are inbound. Hold your position for 5 more minutes." 5 minutes. Marcus looked at his exhausted team and their dwindling ammunition supplies. 5 minutes might as well have been 5 hours against an enemy sniper of this caliber supported by over 100 fighters. But they were Rangers. They had trained for impossible situations and faced overwhelming odds before. They would hold this position because that's what Rangers do. As enemy forces began their final assault on the building, Marcus gripped his rifle tighter and prepared for the longest 5 minutes of his life. In the smoke-filled marketplace below, the enemy sniper was also preparing for the final confrontation, confident that his superior numbers and professional skills would prevail. Neither man knew that this battle would become the stuff of legend, talked about in military circles for years to come as an example of courage, skill, and the refusal to surrender even when facing impossible odds. The smoke had grown thicker, rolling across the marketplace like a living thing. Marcus could barely see 20 meters in any direction now, which meant the enemy snipers on the ridge were probably having visibility problems too. It was the only advantage they had left. "Team, we use the smoke to our advantage," Marcus whispered into his radio. "Kim, you're our designated marksman. Find a position where you can engage those snipers when the smoke clears. Walsh, Chen, we're going to move building to building and try to break their encirclement." The plan was risky, but staying put meant certain death when the enemy launched their final assault. Marcus checked his watch. 14 minutes until air support arrived. They had to hold out just a little longer. Chen suddenly held up his hand, signaling for silence. Through the smoke, they could hear voices speaking in a language Marcus didn't recognize, but the tone was clearly tactical communication. The enemy was coordinating their final approach. Walsh pointed toward a shadow moving through the gray haze about 50 meters away. Then, another. The enemy fighters were using the smoke cover to advance just as Marcus had feared they would. "Contact front," Kim whispered, raising her rifle toward the approaching figures. Marcus made a quick decision. "Hold fire. Let them get closer. We take them quietly if possible." The first enemy fighter emerged from the smoke like a ghost, his rifle sweeping left and right as he searched for targets. Marcus could see he was young, maybe early 20s, wearing mismatched military gear and carrying an assault rifle that had seen better days. Behind him, 2 more figures moved cautiously through the haze. Chen was closest to their position. Marcus watched as the young ranger slowly drew his combat knife and prepared to engage. The enemy fighter was now less than 10 meters away, still unaware of their presence. What happened next unfolded in deadly silence. Chen moved like a shadow, covering the distance in 3 quick steps. His knife found its mark with surgical precision, and the enemy fighter dropped without making a sound. The other 2 fighters were still advancing blindly through the smoke, unaware that their point man was down. Walsh took the second fighter with her own blade, moving just as quietly and efficiently. The third enemy fighter finally realized something was wrong, but Kim's rifle coughed once through its suppressor, and he collapsed before he could raise an alarm. 3 down without alerting the rest of the enemy force. It was the kind of precision work that separated Rangers from ordinary soldiers. But Marcus knew it was just the beginning. More enemy fighters would be moving through the smoke, and they wouldn't all be caught off guard. His radio crackled quietly. "Alpha Team, this is Overwatch. Thermal shows approximately 15 hostiles moving toward your position from the east. Another group of 10 approaching from the south. The smoke is masking their exact locations." Marcus did the math quickly. They'd eliminated 3 enemies, but at least 25 more were still actively hunting them. The odds were still overwhelming. "Kim, can you get a clear shot at any of those snipers on the ridge?" She adjusted her scope and studied the hillside through the drifting smoke. "Negative, Sergeant. Visibility is too poor, and they're well concealed among the rocks." Marcus was about to respond when the distinctive crack of a sniper rifle echoed across the valley. The bullet struck the stone wall just inches from Walsh's head, sending fragments of rock flying in all directions. "Snipers got eyes on us," Walsh reported, pressing herself closer to the wall. That shot had been too accurate to be a lucky guess. Someone on that ridge could see through the smoke better than they could, probably using thermal optics or other enhanced vision equipment. It was another reminder that they were facing a well-equipped and professionally trained enemy force. The radio came alive with urgent chatter. "Alpha Team, command. We're seeing coordinated movement from multiple enemy groups. They're executing a classic pincer movement to box you in. You need to break contact and move to alternate Extraction Point Charlie." Extraction Point Charlie was a clearing about 800 meters northwest of the village, on the opposite side of the ridge from the snipers. Getting there would mean moving through enemy-controlled territory while being hunted by superior numbers, but it was their only chance. "Copy, command. Moving to Charlie now." Marcus looked at his team. They all understood the situation. Getting to that extraction point was going to require fighting their way through multiple enemy positions while avoiding sniper fire from the ridge. It was the kind of mission that looked impossible on paper. "All right, listen up," Marcus said quietly. "We move in bounds. I'll take point, Walsh covers our left flank, Chen watches the right, Kim provides rear security. We stop for nothing and nobody gets left behind." As they prepared to move, Chen spotted movement in the smoke ahead of them. More enemy fighters were approaching, this time from a different direction. Marcus counted at least 6 figures moving in tactical formation through the gray haze. "Contact, 12 o'clock, Chen whispered. This group was more alert than the previous one. They were spacing themselves properly and using hand signals to coordinate their movement. Taking them down quietly wasn't going to be an option. Marcus made another quick decision. "Grenades. On my mark." He pulled a fragmentation grenade from his vest, as did Walsh and Chen. Kim kept her rifle trained on the approaching enemies, ready to engage any survivors. "Mark." 3 grenades sailed through the smoke in perfect arcs. The enemy fighters had just enough time to realize what was happening before the explosions tore through their formation. The coordinated blasts created a temporary gap in the enemy's advance, giving the Rangers the window they needed. "Move, move, move." They sprinted through the smoke, using the confusion and temporary deafness caused by the grenades to mask their movement. Marcus led them toward a narrow alley that would provide concealment while they worked their way toward the extraction point. As they ran, more sniper rounds cracked through the air around them. The shooters on the ridge were firing blind into the smoke, hoping to get lucky. One bullet passed so close to Marcus that he felt the air displacement against his cheek. They reached the alley and pressed themselves against its stone walls, breathing heavily. The smoke was starting to thin slightly, which meant they were running out of concealment. Soon the enemy would be able to see them clearly again. Walsh pointed toward the far end of the alley. Movement. Marcus saw them too. At least 4 enemy fighters positioning themselves to block their escape route.
The trap was tightening around them with military precision. Kim, can you take them from here?
She studied the targets through her scope. 2 for sure, maybe 3 if I'm fast enough.
Do it. Kim's rifle spoke 4 times in rapid succession.
3 of the enemy fighters went down immediately, while the 4th stumbled and disappeared behind a wall, apparently wounded.
Clear, she reported. They moved quickly through the alley, stepping over the bodies of the enemies Kim had eliminated. Marcus noticed their equipment again. These weren't local insurgents with homemade weapons.
Their gear was modern, their positioning was professional, and their coordination suggested extensive training. As they reached the end of the alley, Marcus's radio exploded with chatter.
Alpha Team, you've got major problems. Thermal shows enemy reinforcements arriving via vehicles on the main road. Count is now over 60 hostiles in your area. 60. The number hit Marcus like a physical blow. Whoever was behind this operation had committed significant resources to eliminating his 4-person team. This wasn't a chance encounter or even a planned ambush. This was a full-scale military operation designed to ensure they didn't leave the valley alive. Command, what's the status on air support? Marcus asked urgently.
Fast movers are 8 minutes out, but they're reporting heavy ground-to-air missile activity in your area.
The enemy has surface-to-air capabilities.
That explained why their adversaries were so confident. They'd not only positioned forces to surround and eliminate the Ranger team, they'd also prepared defenses against aerial rescue attempts. The level of planning and resources involved suggested this was much bigger than a simple high-value target capture mission.
Chen suddenly grabbed Marcus's arm.
Sergeant, look at the ridge. Marcus followed his gaze and felt his blood turn cold. The smoke was finally clearing enough to see the northern ridge clearly, and what he saw there made him understand just how dire their situation had become. The ridge was lined with enemy fighters, at least 20 of them spread across advantageous positions among the rocks. They had clear sight lines to the entire valley floor, and they were all armed with long-range weapons.
It was like looking up at a firing squad.
But what worried Marcus most was what he could see beyond the immediate sniper positions. Higher up on the ridge, barely visible in the distance, were several larger shapes that looked suspiciously like heavy weapons emplacements. Machine gun positions, possibly even mortars. Command, the enemy has established major defensive positions on the northern ridge. Multiple heavy weapons, clear fields of fire. They're not just trying to capture or kill us.
They're defending something. The realization hit him like lightning. This wasn't about eliminating his team at all.
They'd accidentally stumbled into something much larger. The enemy had been using the village as a base of operations, and the Rangers' presence threatened whatever they were protecting.
Rodriguez, command confirms your assessment. Satellite imagery shows significant enemy infrastructure in that area.
You've uncovered a major enemy stronghold. That changed everything. If they could survive long enough to call in proper airstrikes and ground reinforcements, this accidental discovery could turn into a major tactical victory. But first they had to live through the next few minutes. The smoke continued to clear, and Marcus could see enemy fighters moving to surround their position from multiple directions. The window for reaching extraction point Charlie was closing rapidly. Team, we're going to have to fight our way out.
Chen, do you still have smoke grenades?
2 left, Sergeant.
Pop them between us and the ridge. We need concealment from those snipers.
Chen launched both grenades toward the middle ground between their position and the enemy ridge. Fresh white smoke began billowing up, creating a temporary screen. As they prepared to move, Kim suddenly stiffened and raised her rifle toward a building they'd passed earlier.
Movement in the upper windows. Multiple positions.
Marcus looked back and saw muzzle flashes from several windows in the buildings behind them. The enemy had positioned fighters in elevated positions to cut off their retreat. They were now surrounded on 3 sides, with only the smokescreen protecting them from the snipers on the 4th. The radio crackled with increasing desperation in the controller's voice. Alpha Team, you need to break contact immediately.
Enemy forces are converging on your position from all directions. Fast movers are still 5 minutes out. 5 minutes. It might as well have been 5 hours.
Marcus looked at his team and saw the same understanding in their eyes. They were going to have to make their stand here, in this narrow alley between stone buildings, with 60 enemy fighters closing in from all sides. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez pressed his back against the crumbling brick wall, sweat mixing with dust on his weathered face. The radio crackled to life in his ear, cutting through the distant rumble of explosions that had been echoing across the valley all morning. Alpha Team, this is Command. We're getting reports of enemy movement in your sector. Multiple contacts confirmed. Enemies everywhere, Rangers. Stay sharp and watch your six. Marcus glanced at his team spread across the abandoned marketplace. Corporal Jenny Walsh crouched behind an overturned vegetable cart, her rifle scanning the rooftops. Private First Class Tony Chen had positioned himself near the fountain in the center of the square, using its stone base for cover. Specialist Sarah Kim kept watch on their rear, her keen eyes searching every shadow and doorway. The mission had started simple enough. Intelligence reports indicated that a high-value target was hiding somewhere in this remote mountain village. The team was supposed to conduct a quick reconnaissance, gather information, and call in backup if needed. But nothing ever went according to plan in these situations. Marcus had been leading ranger teams for 8 years, ever since he'd graduated from the grueling training program at Fort Benning. He'd seen action in 3 different countries, faced down insurgents in urban environments, and survived more firefights than he cared to remember. But something about this place felt different. Wrong. The village sat nestled in a valley between 2 steep ridges, creating a natural bowl that could easily become a trap. Ancient stone buildings lined narrow streets that wound their way up the hillsides like a maze. Most of the civilians had evacuated days ago when fighting broke out in the region, leaving behind empty homes and abandoned shops. Rodriguez, what's your status? The voice of Lieutenant Colonel Hayes came through the radio, steady but concerned. Marcus keyed his mic. We're in position at the marketplace, sir. No visual contact yet, but something doesn't feel right. The place is too quiet. He wasn't exaggerating. In all his years of combat experience, Marcus had learned to trust his instincts. The absence of sound bothered him more than gunfire would have. No birds singing, no insects buzzing, no wind rustling through the trees that dotted the hillsides. Even the usual background noise of a village was missing. Walsh caught his attention with a hand signal. She pointed toward a 3-story building on the eastern edge of the square. Marcus followed her gaze and spotted movement in one of the upper windows. A curtain had shifted slightly, as if someone had been watching them, and quickly stepped back. Chen noticed it too. The young private from California had joined the Rangers just 6 months earlier, but he'd already proven himself to be observant and reliable under pressure. He slowly adjusted his position to get a better angle on the building while trying to remain concealed. Command, we have possible contact in Building 7 on the eastern perimeter, Marcus whispered into his radio. Request permission to investigate. Static filled his earpiece for several seconds before Hayes responded. Negative, Alpha Team. Hold your position. We're tracking multiple heat signatures moving through the area. You're about to have company. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Heat signatures meant thermal imaging from aircraft or satellites. If Command could see enemy forces converging on their location, the situation was about to get very complicated very quickly. Kim suddenly raised her fist, the signal for immediate danger. She'd spotted something behind them, cutting off their planned escape route. Marcus turned to see 3 figures in tactical gear moving between buildings about 200 meters away. They were trying to stay hidden, but Kim's sharp eyes had caught the glint of sunlight reflecting off their weapons. The radio crackled again. Alpha Team, we count at least 15 hostiles moving to surround your position. They know you're there. 15 against 4. Those weren't impossible odds for a well-trained Ranger team, but they weren't good either. Marcus quickly assessed their options. The marketplace offered some cover, but not enough for a prolonged firefight. They needed to find better defensive positions or extract immediately. Walsh, Chen, start moving toward the northern buildings. Kim, stay on rear security. We need to get to higher ground. As his team began to move, Marcus caught sight of something that made his blood run cold. On the ridge overlooking the village, approximately 800 meters away, he saw the unmistakable shape of a sniper's rifle barrel protruding from behind a large boulder. The angle and distance were perfect for covering the entire marketplace. He was about to warn his team when the first shots rang out. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple directions simultaneously.
Bullets sparked off the stone fountain and shattered the windows of surrounding buildings. The enemy had begun their attack. Walsh dove behind a concrete barrier as rounds zipped past her head. Chen scrambled for cover behind a thick wooden door that had been left propped against a wall. Kim returned fire with controlled bursts, trying to suppress the shooters who had appeared in the alleyway behind them. Marcus pressed himself deeper into his covered position and keyed his radio. "Command, we are taking heavy fire from multiple directions. Request immediate air support and extraction." "Copy that, Alpha Team. Birds are 20 minutes out. Can you hold that long?" 20 minutes might as well have been 20 hours. Marcus knew they had to move soon or risk being completely surrounded. The enemy fighters were using standard insurgent tactics, trying to pin them down in the open area while positioning themselves for a coordinated assault. "Team, we're moving to Building 4 on the north side. Walsh, lay down covering fire. Chen, follow me. Kim, watch our backs and move when I give the signal." Walsh opened up with her automatic rifle, sending controlled bursts toward the muzzle flashes she could see in the eastern buildings. The steady rhythm of her weapon gave Marcus and Chen the opportunity to sprint across 30 meters of open ground to reach better cover. As they ran, Marcus heard the distinct crack of a high-powered rifle echo across the valley. A sniper round struck the ground just inches from Chen's feet, sending up a spray of dirt and stone fragments. The shooter on the ridge had joined the fight. They reached the building and pressed themselves against its stone wall, breathing heavily. Marcus peered around the corner and saw Kim still pinned down near the fountain. Enemy fighters were closing in on her position from 2 different directions. "Kim, get out of there now," he shouted into his radio. She sprinted toward their position, zigzagging to avoid the bullets that seemed to follow her every step. Another sniper round cracked past her head, so close that Marcus could see her flinch as she ran. Walsh provided covering fire until her magazine ran empty, then she too began moving toward their new position. The enemy fighters were getting bolder, advancing from their concealed positions to chase the retreating Rangers. As his team regrouped behind the stone building, Marcus tried to make sense of their tactical situation. The enemy had positioned themselves with military precision, suggesting they weren't dealing with a random group of insurgents. Someone with training and experience was coordinating this attack. "Rodriguez, this is command. Satellite imagery shows enemy reinforcements moving up the valley road. You've got approximately 40 hostiles converging on your position." 40. Marcus felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool mountain air. His 4-person team was now facing odds of 10 to 1, with limited ammunition and no easy escape route. The radio continued, "We're also detecting possible IED placements on the main roads leading out of the village. The enemy has planned this very carefully." That confirmed Marcus's suspicions. This wasn't a chance encounter or a reactive ambush. Someone had known they were coming and had prepared accordingly. Either their mission had been compromised, or they'd walked into a carefully laid trap. Chen tapped his shoulder and pointed toward the ridge where the sniper was positioned. Through his rifle scope, Marcus could see movement among the rocks. The sniper wasn't alone up there. At least 3 other figures were maneuvering to get better angles on the marketplace below. "Command, we have multiple snipers on the northern ridge. They have clear sight lines to our position and most escape routes." "Copy that, Alpha Team. Fast movers are en route for close air support, but you need to mark those sniper positions with smoke." Marcus reached for the smoke grenade on his vest. Air support would help, but first they had to survive long enough for the aircraft to arrive. The enemy fighters in the village were getting closer, and their covering fire was becoming more accurate. Walsh suddenly grabbed his arm. "Sergeant, look at the smoke coming from the southern buildings." Marcus turned to see thick black smoke billowing up from several structures on the far side of the marketplace. At first he thought the buildings might be on fire from the fighting, but then he realized the smoke was too dense and too uniform. Someone was using it as concealment to mask their movements. "Smokescreen," he muttered, understanding immediately what was happening. The enemy was preparing for a final assault under cover of the artificial smoke cloud. The radio crackled with increasing urgency. "Alpha Team, thermal imaging shows large numbers of hostiles moving under that smoke cover. They're setting up for a coordinated attack on your position." Marcus looked at his team. Walsh was checking her remaining ammunition. Chen was scanning for targets through his rifle scope.
Kim was applying a field dressing to a small cut on her arm from flying debris. They were all professionals, trained for exactly this kind of situation, but they were still heavily outnumbered and running low on options.
Listen up, he said quietly. We're going to move to that two-story building on the west side. It'll give us better defensive positions and multiple exit routes. When I say go, we move fast and stay together. As he spoke, Marcus noticed that the gunfire from the village had decreased significantly. The enemy fighters were repositioning themselves, probably getting ready for their next phase of attack. In his experience, quiet moments like this often preceded the most dangerous part of any engagement. The smoke from the southern buildings continued to thicken, creating an ominous gray wall that was slowly drifting across the marketplace. Visibility was going to become a major problem very soon. Marcus was about to give the order to move when his radio exploded with static and urgent voices. All Alpha Team elements, this is Overwatch. We have eyes on multiple enemy snipers taking positions on the ridgeline. Enemies everywhere, Rangers. Count shows at least 6 sniper teams with clear sightlines to your location. 6 sniper teams. That changed everything. Moving across open ground was no longer just dangerous, it was almost certainly suicidal. Marcus felt the tactical situation slipping away from them as the smoke continued to spread and the enemy completed their preparations for what was obviously going to be a final, overwhelming assault.